April 3rd, 1367. A windswept plain in northern Spain. The Black Prince, England's greatest warrior, victor of Crécy and Poitiers, stared across the battlefield at the largest army he'd ever faced. 25,000 enemy soldiers stretched across the horizon. French veterans who'd conquered half of Europe. Spanish knights fighting for their homeland. Professional soldiers who'd never known defeat. The prince commanded just 10,000 men. His treasury was empty. His supply lines were cut. His closest allies had betrayed him. Logic said retreat. Honour demanded victory. But Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, had built his legend on achieving the impossible. This wasn't just another battle. This was a fight that would determine the fate of kingdoms. If the prince won, England would dominate Spain and secure the greatest alliance in Christendom. If he lost, English power on the continent would crumble forever. Everything his father, Edward III, had built through decades of war would die on Spanish soil. The enemy believed they had already won. Why shouldn't they? They outnumbered the English more than 2-1. They controlled the battlefield. They had the prince trapped with no escape route. All they had to do was advance and crush this small English force that had dared to challenge the combined might of France and Spain. But they had made one critical mistake. They had forgotten that the Black Prince was the most dangerous general alive when faced with impossible odds. The man who had captured the King of France at Poitiers wasn't planning to lose in Spain. This is the story of Najera. Welcome to Britain's history. Today we're covering the medieval battle that showcased English military excellence at its absolute peak. The triumph that cemented the Black Prince's reputation as the greatest commander of the age. But before we get to that devastating dawn attack, before we watch English arrows destroy Spanish cavalry, we need to understand why the Black Prince was fighting in Spain and why this battle mattered so desperately. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into English military genius, subscribe. We cover the battles where English commanders demonstrated tactical innovation and strategic brilliance, the victories that built a legend. The Spanish Civil War that drew the Black Prince into Iberia began as a dynastic struggle, but became a proxy conflict between England and France. When King Pedro I of Castile, known as either the Cruel or the Just depending on one's perspective, came under attack from his half-brother Enrique de Trastamara, both sides sought foreign allies. Enrique had French support. The legendary Bertrand du Guesclin commanded French troops backing the rebellion. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were professional warriors who'd been fighting the English for decades. They knew English tactics, they'd studied English weaknesses. They represented the finest military talent France could deploy. Pedro appealed to the Black Prince for help, offering enormous financial rewards and strategic concessions. For the prince, this seemed like an opportunity to secure English dominance over Spain while solving Aquitaine's financial problems through Spanish gold. The alliance promised to give England control over Castile's powerful navy, ships that could challenge French maritime supremacy. But the Spanish venture proved cursed from the beginning. The winter march across the Pyrenees nearly destroyed the English army before it reached enemy territory. Supply problems plagued the expedition. Local support materialised slowly. By the time English forces reached Spanish soil, they were already weakened by logistics failures and harsh weather. The enemy army the Black Prince faced at Najera was a formidable coalition. Du Guesclin's French regulars formed the professional corps, 1,500 veteran soldiers who'd conquered territories across Europe. Spanish heavy cavalry provided shock power. Thousands of Spanish light cavalry called jinetes offered mobility and harassment capabilities learned from Moorish warfare traditions. Most intimidating was the army's sheer size. Contemporary sources suggest Enrique commanded up to 30,000 troops, though modern historians estimate 25,000 as more realistic. Either way, the numerical disadvantage facing English forces was overwhelming. This wasn't Crécy or Poitiers, where English armies faced roughly equal numbers. At Najera, the prince was genuinely outnumbered more than 2-1. The terrain seemed to favour the larger army. The battlefield was an open plain, offering plenty of space for Spanish cavalry operations. There were no defensive positions English forces could occupy. No natural barriers that might equalise numbers. just flat ground where larger numbers should have guaranteed victory. But the Black Prince understood that battles were won through tactical innovation, not numerical superiority. His greatest victories had come when facing overwhelming odds. The key was creating conditions where English advantages, superior archery, disciplined infantry, and professional command could overcome raw numbers. The prince's battle plan was audacious to the point of recklessness. Instead of awaiting enemy attack, he would launch a surprise assault at dawn. Instead of fighting from defensive positions, he would seize the initiative through aggressive maneuver. Most importantly, he would use the landscape itself to neutralize enemy numbers by attacking from an unexpected direction. The night march that preceded Najera was a masterpiece of military deception. While enemy scouts watched the main road, English forces moved silently through hills behind the Spanish position. This maneuver required perfect coordination. Thousands of soldiers moving in darkness without alerting enemy patrols. One mistake would have resulted in catastrophic defeat. The march also demonstrated the prince's understanding of psychological warfare. By appearing where the enemy least expected, English forces would create confusion and panic. Spanish commanders would have to reorganize their entire army while under attack. The carefully planned formations that should have guaranteed Spanish victory would become liabilities when attacked from the wrong direction. As dawn broke on April 3rd, Spanish sentries were horrified to see English banners approaching from the north, instead of the expected southern approach. Enrique and du Guesclin realized their army was facing the wrong direction and desperately attempted to redeploy. But repositioning 25,000 men while under threat of imminent attack proved impossible. The English army advanced in 3 divisions according to tactical doctrine, perfected over decades of continental warfare. The prince ordered all knights to fight on foot, eliminating any temptation to engage in individual heroics rather than maintaining formation discipline. Horses were sent to the rear, ensuring that retreat would be impossible and victory essential. John of Gaunt, the prince's brother, commanded the vanguard, 3,000 armoured infantry supported by longbowmen on both flanks. The prince himself led the centre with 4,000 men. A reserve division under Allied commanders provided depth and flexibility. This formation had proven successful in previous battles and maximised English advantages in discipline and coordination. The Spanish army's hasty redeployment created exactly the chaos the Black Prince had hoped to achieve. Du Guesclin's professional French infantry managed to organise a defensive line, but Spanish cavalry units found themselves scattered and unable to coordinate. The careful battle plan that should have utilised Spanish numerical superiority collapsed into improvisation and confusion. The battle began with du Guesclin's attack on John of Gaunt's vanguard. These were the 2 finest infantry forces in medieval Europe, French professionals against English veterans. The fighting was brutal and sustained, with both sides demonstrating the tactical expertise that had made them legendary. Neither side could gain decisive advantage through direct combat alone. But while attention focused on this central struggle, Spanish light cavalry attempted to harass English flanks using traditional tactics that had proven effective against conventional enemies. The Jinetes charged forward, expecting to disrupt English formations through hit-and-run attacks. Instead, they rode directly into the killing zone of English longbowmen. The longbow was still the supreme medieval weapon when properly employed. English archers could loose 12 aimed shots per minute at effective ranges exceeding 200 yards. The bodkin point arrows they used could penetrate most armour at close range and were devastatingly effective against horses. Spanish cavalry had never faced anything like the volume of accurate fire English archers could deliver. The destruction of Spanish cavalry was swift and complete. Horses fell by the hundreds, throwing riders or crushing them beneath dying animals. The survivors fled in panic, leaving Spanish infantry exposed and demoralised. Within minutes, the prince's tactical gamble had eliminated the enemy's most mobile forces and reduced Spanish numerical advantage significantly. Seeing his cavalry destroyed, Enrique personally led his heavy infantry in 3 desperate charges against the English centre. These attacks demonstrated tremendous personal courage, but tactical futility. Spanish soldiers advanced into the same arrow storms that had destroyed their cavalry. Each charge was broken by longbow fire before reaching English lines. The prince recognised the moment for decisive action. While Spanish attacks were faltering, he committed his reserve forces in a coordinated assault designed to shatter enemy resistance completely. English formations advanced systematically, maintaining discipline, while Spanish resistance crumbled under sustained pressure. The collapse, when it came, was sudden and complete. Spanish morale broke simultaneously across the entire army. Soldiers who had been confident of victory hours earlier now fled in panic toward the only escape route, a narrow stone bridge leading to Najera town. Thousands of men crowded onto the bridge, creating a deadly bottleneck, where many were crushed or fell into the river. Du Guesclin, recognising that further resistance was impossible, surrendered to Sir John Chandos with the dignity befitting a professional soldier. Enrique escaped at the last moment, saved by a loyal follower who gave him a fresh horse. Most of the Spanish nobility wasn't so fortunate. Hundreds were captured for ransom or killed in the pursuit. The battlefield statistics were staggering. English casualties were minimal, perhaps 200 killed and wounded. Spanish losses approached 7,000 dead, wounded, and captured. The disparity reflected not just tactical superiority, but the devastating effect of panic on military formations. Once Spanish resistance collapsed, the retreat became a massacre. The victory appeared to solve all the prince's problems. Pedro was restored to his throne. The French threat to Castile was eliminated. England had gained a powerful ally and access to Spanish wealth. Du Guesclin, France's most dangerous general, was a prisoner. The Black Prince had added another impossible victory to his already legendary reputation. But Najera's triumph contained the seeds of ultimate disaster. Pedro proved unable or unwilling to honour his financial promises to English forces. The prince's army remained in Spain through the brutal summer heat, suffering from disease and supply shortages while awaiting payment that never came. Dysentery and other ailments began destroying English strength more effectively than any enemy army. The prince himself contracted the intestinal disease that would eventually kill him. The dysentery he caught in Spanish camps would plague him for the remaining 9 years of his life, gradually destroying his health and ending his military career. The greatest warrior of the age became an invalid, unable to campaign and forced to rely on subordinates for military command. The financial crisis created by Pedro's betrayal forced the prince to impose heavy taxation on Aquitaine, triggering rebellions that gave France pretexts to resume the war. The brief peace achieved through military victory was squandered through political mismanagement. English gains in Spain proved temporary when Enrique returned with renewed French support. By 1369, everything the prince had won at Najera was lost. Pedro was dead, killed by Enrique in personal combat. The Castilian fleet had joined France against England. The Black Prince was too sick to campaign effectively. The English position in France, which had seemed unshakable after Najera, began the long decline that would end with complete expulsion. From a tactical perspective, Najera represents medieval English military art at its peak. The prince's use of deception, surprise, and concentrated firepower to overcome overwhelming odds was masterful. The coordination between different arms, cavalry, infantry, and archers, demonstrated professional military competence of the highest order. The battle validated tactical innovations that had been developing throughout the 100 Years' War. The decision to have knights fight on foot eliminated the individual heroics that often disrupted medieval battle plans. The systematic use of longbows to destroy cavalry charges proved that disciplined archery could neutralise traditional military advantages. The night march that positioned English forces where the enemy least expected them showed sophisticated understanding of military deception. Medieval armies rarely attempted such complex manoeuvres, preferring straightforward approaches that minimised coordination risks. The prince's willingness to attempt something unprecedented demonstrated the tactical flexibility that characterised English military thinking. The aftermath also illustrated the limitations of purely military solutions to political problems. Tactical brilliance could win battles, but it couldn't solve the deeper issues that had created the Spanish Civil War. Without political stability and reliable allies, military victories became temporary achievements rather than lasting solutions. The prince's personal tragedy paralleled England's strategic disappointments. The warrior who had seemed invincible discovered that disease could defeat him more completely than any enemy army. His physical decline symbolised England's broader military deterioration, as the advantages gained through innovation were squandered through political failures. Yet Najera's tactical lessons influenced military thinking for generations. The battle demonstrated that smaller, professional armies could defeat larger forces through superior training, leadership, and tactical innovation. These principles would guide English military development through subsequent conflicts, from the Wars of the Roses to colonial campaigns. The longbow's performance at Najera represented the weapon's last great triumph in European warfare. Gunpowder weapons were already beginning to change military technology, but at Najera, traditional English archery proved once again that disciplined missile troops could dominate battlefields when properly employed. The battle also marked the end of medieval chivalric ideals in English military culture. The prince's decision to fight on foot, his systematic destruction of enemy cavalry, and his use of commoner archers to defeat noble opponents represented practical military thinking, triumphing over romantic tradition. Modern military historians regard Najera as one of the finest examples of tactical innovation in medieval warfare. The prince's use of surprise, deception, and concentrated firepower became standard elements of military planning. His ability to maintain discipline under extreme pressure demonstrated leadership qualities that would be studied and emulated for centuries. The battle's human cost deserves recognition alongside its tactical brilliance. Thousands of Spanish soldiers died because their commanders underestimated English military capability. The massacre at the bridge showed how quickly military victory could become humanitarian tragedy when discipline broke down. The prince's later illness and death reminded contemporaries that even the greatest warriors were mortal. His physical decline from Iberian diseases illustrated the dangers of medieval campaigning beyond mere battlefield casualties. Disease killed more medieval soldiers than combat, and even the most successful commanders weren't immune. The broader strategic consequences of Najera shaped European politics for decades. France's temporary setback encouraged other English interventions on the continent. Spain's civil war demonstrated how internal conflicts could become international proxy wars. The battle showed both the possibilities and limitations of medieval military power. If this is the kind of tactical history that interests you, battles where military genius overcame impossible odds, victories that demonstrated the height of medieval warfare, moments when individual brilliance shaped the destiny of nations, then you know what to do. These are the campaigns that built legends through tactical innovation and personal courage. The Black Prince's triumph at Najera stands as testament to English military excellence when commanded by exceptional leadership. Though the strategic benefits proved temporary, the tactical achievement remains one of the finest examples of medieval warfare at its most sophisticated and effective. Thank you for watching Britain's history, the battles that showcased English military genius and tactical brilliance, told the way they deserve to be remembered.